Welcome to Stories We Love. Stories We Love is about stories we love. We bring you extraordinary people, situations, or circumstances that will remind you of how much good there is in the world, warm your heart, open your mind, and inspire you in new ways. My name is Karen Lorre. I'm your hostess. And to get the full playlist of Stories We Love, you can go to storiesweloveshow.com. And there you'll find all the episodes plus some bonuses. We're making interviews with people who truly care and who are making a positive difference that benefits this gorgeous world and its creatures and its people, and who remind us that even just as one person, we have much more power than we think. I'm so very happy that you are here. Stay tuned because today we get to talk to the amazing Ken Leinbach. Ken is an author and he does something called urban ecology, which I didn't even know what it was until we talked. So Ken, I realized that urban ecology and the Urban Ecology Center that you run is hard to encapsulate in a few words, but perhaps as we get started, you can take a few minutes and tell us more about what the Urban Ecology Center is and why it's important in the world.
Sure. I'd love to tell you this story. So, well, let's just start this way. So imagine if every child in the world, every day of their life had easy access to nature. They could go out and climb a tree, and they could, be with their friends and scramble along the stream and all of that. So just imagine that. And then imagine if every school that child went to had easy access to a place that facilitated the learning in nature. So not only did they have access after school, but they had access while they were in school. And then imagine if every household, every family, every senior citizen also had access to a place sort of like the neighborhood public library, but you would go and you would learn how to live more lightly on the planet as part of your culture. It's part of what you did. Our premise is that if that world existed, many of the problems that we experience just wouldn't be. They just wouldn't be there at all. That's our vision. And it's based on it's based on some research that about 25, 30 years ago, I discovered. I was a high school science teacher. And one of the things that I figured out when I was teaching science is that if I took my kids outside, even if it had nothing to do, I could be teaching physics that you'd normally do in a classroom on a chalkboard. If I took the kids outside, put them in a circle, started doing stuff with them out there, they actually had better cognitive recall. They learned better. Why is that? Well, I was really intrigued with that. So when life circumstances brought me to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was actually unemployed or fully employed, looking after our two little kids, I had some time in the evenings to do some graduate work, because I wanted to investigate. So why is it that kids seem to learn better outside, my anecdotal experience, than inside? And I learned a whole lot. And one of the things I learned is that our DNA is designed for the natural world. We've been living in the natural world for over, for millions of years. Well, tens of thousands of years, maybe 100,000 years, as Homo sapiens been on the planet, 100,000 years. And during that time, 99.999% of that, we've been under the stars, we've watched the sunsets, we've been in the elements, and that's how our mind relaxes. It makes total sense, right? It's only in this last little blip that we've pushed that away. So what we, and then the other nugget you have to know about is our world is in crisis. And I think people know that now. 30 years ago, when I started this work, that was not understood. And I had the experience of getting very, very close to a piece of land. It was an outdoor laboratory for a public school system where I was teaching. And in the process of getting to know that land over a decade, taking kids every day on walks in that land, I discovered that the land was actually sick, but most people didn't know that or couldn't see it. But because I was watching the nuances of the land, I could see the illness. I could see the blemishes on the leaves. I could see that the amphibians, a number of them only had 3 legs when they should have had 4. And because we were paying attention, we could see that. It turns out it was ozone and acid rain and all the externalities that were happening. And I was curious about that. So when I actually had the opportunity to do some graduate work, I wanted to figure out what's going on the planet and why do kids learn better outside. That was my mission. What I came out with was something interesting. I stumbled upon some research. It's called significant life experience research. And it asks the question, why do some people care about the environment and why do others not? Not as a judgment, but as a research question, right? And so what I discovered by digging into that research, there's a woman named Louise Chawla who sort of put forward this article that really inspired me with a bunch of research, and I looked into that. It turns out that if a kid grows up with consistent contact to natural land from an early age, so imagine that kid I was telling you about in the beginning, if you have contact to natural land from an early age consistently, the odds of developing an environmental ethic or caring about the environment go up a little bit. But if that same kid has a mentor in their life, that means if you, for example, take a kid outside on a consistent basis and show them the awe of nature, right? Or take them hunting or fishing, or take them on a canoe trip. If you do that, you're actually having a huge impact on that kid. And so the children that grow up, or the people, adults that grow up with those 2 ingredients, consistency to nature and a mentor in their life, those 2 things lead to an environmental ethic or behavior that you do in life that actually is good for the planet instead of bad for the planet. Well, that's a pretty powerful piece of research. So then what I did is I'm sitting at home with my 2 little kids cogitating on what am I going to do with myself, with my, what am I going to do? I sort of dreamed up this idea. It's like, well, it seems like we should have a community center that engages kids on a hyper local level in the neighborhood. And let's try this experiment of bringing kids on a regular basis, not just once a season, but on a consistent basis within the same neighborhood to a piece of nature. And let's see what happens. So where do you start? Well, it just so happened that I was in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is sort of a conservative industrial town. It's just sort of a normal city. And there was a high crime park, a 12-acre park, not very big, along a polluted river. And prior to my being there, I was looking for a place to do this. But prior to my being there, this scrappy neighborhood group had gotten together and said, hey, we've got a problem in this 12-acre park that's got a lot of crime on a polluted river, but it's actually pretty cool nature. There's got to be something we could do. So they had thrown together some money and gotten a little portable trailer, really beat up, leaked from the ceiling, didn't have any running water. And they were trying to put together some kind of nature program for kids in the park. I came into the mix with this vision and said, oh my gosh, this would be the perfect platform to start. So it was synergy there. So I became the first full-time executive director, standing on the shoulders of the neighborhood that had put this trailer together and this dynamic woman named Elsa Ankel. And that was the beginning. So it started in a high crime park, met with all the school principals in the neighborhood, said, hey, what would keep you from using us as your outdoor laboratory? They said transportation, money, curriculum connection, and ease of use, because all our teachers are really stressed out. So then we went out and said, okay, we're going to take those 4 problems and figure out a solution to those 4 problems to get an answer to the whole. And we did. And so we started this experiment with borrowed vans from a local daycare that was a minor miracle to find. We had some volunteer teachers who were willing to help us out. We got some school teachers from the schools that were interested in this to actually help us create the curriculum. So there's a curricular connection. And we made it really easy for them because all they had to do was sign up, and we would go pick them up in the vans and bring them and do the education and make it work. We did not make it free because we knew that often when you do things that are free, they're not actually valued as much. So we put a cost to it, and there was some speculation that that wasn't going to work because we're working with very poor schools in the city, but it did. And so then very quickly, our little trailer became a hot spot and a hub of not only the school program, but community programs in the evenings. We had a key to a cinder block bathroom about 25 yards away that we could use when we had community events. And our last year in the trailer, we served 16,000 people.
Wow.
And the crime in the park, the crime stats were showing that the crime was going down tremendously because we are now looking at the park in a different way, right?
And maybe those kids that were doing the crime, or the people that were doing the crime, are getting a better experience of the nature and feeling more calm themselves, so.
Exactly. No, exactly. Because our mission is to connect people in cities to nature and each other. That's simple. That's our mission. But what falls off of that mission is crime reduction, academic improvement, extreme community engagement and community pride, and the healing of nature. Because the other thing that we do really, really well is we engage hundreds and thousands, actually, of neighborhood volunteers to steward the land and to remove the invasive species and to plant natives plants so that the native ecosystem is coming back. It's amazing. I mean, it's an amazing thing. One of the things that I'm probably most proud of with the work that we do, and it's definitely a we. I've had the good fortune to facilitate this incredible neighborhood, but is actually bringing nature back. There's beavers in the river that hadn't been seen in 100 years. There's otters and mink. There's 40 species of fish, where when we started there were only 2.
Wait. How did that happen? Like, because you're working in a park, right? So how does it happen on the river? Is the river going through the park, or is it just...
Yeah. The first park that we did this work in, and that's a sort of a preamble to say that there's more, but the first park that we did this in was along the Milwaukee River. So it's called Riverside Park, and it was on the Milwaukee River. Historically, it was a park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted back at the turn of the century, and was a very popular place to go. But by the time we sort of had this community engagement, the pollution was so high, the crime was so high that the park had no visitation, or very little visitation, and the visitation was pretty nefarious. So, yeah.
But so when you took it over, you creating the native plants, and is that what brought back the beavers and the mink and the...
Well, it was a combination of things.
Yeah.
So, and I need to say over and over and over again, we are just one cog in a partnership of the world. So then we were a catalyst that brought eyes and ears to this polluted river, that then engaged with many other organizations, the sewage district in our area, the county park system, the Riverkeeper group, and we all collaborated and said, what are we going to do about this river? So that became another project that emerged out of this. So then in the process of doing that, we actually removed a dam. We as a community did a massive cleanup of the river. And that's what started to bring the fish back. But it was catalyzed by people actually getting down there to be part of it, because it had become the backyard instead of the front yard of the city.
I love the collaboration between all the groups. That feels really like now everybody's not only helping nature, but probably getting better relationships with each other and better communication. And so that's got to be good. Then I've heard you say that the tagline for the Ecology Center, Urban Ecology Center, is so much life. So talk a little bit about that. And then I have so many more questions.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very cool tagline because it's so indicative of what happens. So what happens is when you place an ecology center in a blighted park, right? The first thing that happens is you start engaging with kids and adults, and you're bringing that kind of life back. So you're bringing this back, then energy, you know. And when you have a group of people together, it actually is like a social energy that changes. It changes things. However, there's another layer which is even cooler, which is when you start bringing people together and partnering with nature. Nature is a phenomenal partner if we do the right thing. So when we started this work, we thought the restoration of this area would take much longer than it did, but it actually happened quite quickly. So what I mean by that is bird species, when you start changing the dynamic of the plants and the soils and the water, you now have insects start coming back that weren't there before. A rusty patch bumblebee that was an endangered bumblebee that hadn't been seen in Milwaukee in years is now back. We have dragonflies that had never been in this county before. I mean,
Wow.
when you look at the world and you see that there's 30% decline in most species on the planet, here in Milwaukee, you're actually growing species. And it has to do with that hyper local restoration work, which I believe is the answer is the solution, frankly. If you're in Nepal, it's in the urban areas of Nepal, they're doing the same work, right? You do the same thing in Mexico City. I mean, name a city. You can do this kind of work everywhere. And that's what's so cool in my view about this is that, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but is we did not have specialists that came in to do this work. We found abundance from within our community to make this happen. And we're just a normal town. So it feels like this can happen anywhere.
I love that so much. And I found something in my house called a snake fly. I'd never even seen one before, and I sent it to a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, that's a snake fly." And he said I should put it on something called iNaturalist, which I still haven't done yet, but maybe by the time this airs, I'll do it. And I said, "Why is it endangered?" And then I looked it up, and he said, "Yeah," he said, most insects are endangered." And I was like, "Oh my God." And I looked it up, and it's a prehistoric insect. And I've lived in this area where I live in nature in Los Angeles in a canyon, and I'd never seen that insect before, and I have a lot of bugs here, and I like them. And I mean, I don't always like them in my house. We took that one outside and put it on a plant, but I like them. I think they're amazing. And this fly, this snake fly, was so beautiful. The wings were so cool, and it's prehistoric and rare. And I was like, wow. And so I'm hoping, like what you're doing, I love it. I love it so much. And I'm just aware of how important insects are, and how important. And this one eats aphids, which eat, the butterfly eggs. So you need to have snake flies, and it eats mites. And I don't know what mites are, but I'm sure that it'd be good if I have more of them. And so hopefully it's proliferating on my plants outside and doing some good for them, so that when the butterflies come, they don't eat the eggs. The aphids don't eat the eggs.
Right. No, yeah, you're right on, and that's the so much life tagline is so appropriate, because you would think that if you're bringing, we started with hundreds of kids, and now thousands of kids, and now tens of thousands of kids and adults. We're serving as many adults as we are kids. But when last year, 500,000 people came through our parks during the lockdown. And that was because sometimes I almost feel like that was our whole purpose, was to make these very special places available at the time of highest need.
Oh, I love that.
It's quite interesting. But the parks that we're managing are the biodiversity within them is significantly higher than anywhere else around. So because of the partnership of humans and nature working together on the same thing, it just brings so much life back, which includes the beavers and the minks and the numerous fish, as well as all the kids and adults. So it's not a one replacing the other; it's a both and.
Yes. I love that. Nature is so smart and is so great at healing herself when we get out of the way, or when we assist in some way. So I love that you're doing this. Now, you mentioned that your first park. So tell me, like, how many parks do you have, and how many schools or other areas, daycare or senior places do you serve?
Yeah. So we started out in a little trailer. Once we outgrew that trailer, I was introduced to I was new to the nonprofit world, and I was introduced to the idea of a capital campaign. So we pulled off what I would call a miraculous fundraising experience. Now that I'm in the business, I realize this happens, but at the time I didn't know. And we built this beautiful building. It was the greenest building in southeastern Wisconsin at the time it was built, and it created quite a lot of attention, which we weren't anticipating and we weren't asking for. We were just trying to build a good container for this program.
So you wanted the building to be consistent with your value of nature. So when you say a green building, you were using sustainable things or using better energy resources, or like
Yes, all of that. So we had the largest solar installation in the state of Wisconsin on our roof. We had, when we built it,
yeah.
we used all 80% recycled materials. It's a phenomenal building. It's a beautiful thing. But really all we did was there's all these certifications you can get for this kind of work, but it can be simply this: every decision, a building is a million decisions. Every decision you make sure you have two voices in that around the table. One is your great grandkids 7 generations out.
Mm-hmm.
Just picking 7 because it's often used. But actually pretend that kid is there, and would they approve of this decision?
I love that.
If you start with that framework, your building's going to be a green building. And then the other framework we did is the black-crowned night heron, which is a bird that couldn't breed here, but now it can because of the cleaned up river. If the black-crowned night heron is around the table and has a voice, would it approve of the decision? So you're getting present tense and future tense around the decision-making table. And that's all you need to create a green building. You don't need all these checklists and everything else. You just need those two voices. And so that's what we've done with all of our projects, to make sure those two voices are present.
Wow, that really moves me. So you thank you. So I asked you like how many schools and things that you had done, and I distracted you with the question. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, so we moved from the trailer and with our neighborhood environmental education project, which is a hyper local model. That's really what allowed us to prosper. We work with schools within a 2-mile radius. There's over 40 schools within 2 miles of where I'm sitting right now. We're in the dense city of Milwaukee.
Wow.
And so when we moved from the trailer to this building, we tripled our program overnight. The schools are clamoring to get into our program. We are fully booked with our 2-mile radius. The city's bigger than that. So then we had another neighborhood in a park that was on a racial divide, lots of crime. It used to be a historic park that had exact same story as Riverside Park. It's called Washington Park. And the neighborhood there asked, would you consider moving in? Putting aside, you've had such success, would you move over here? Actually, that's interesting because we went to the meeting where they invited us, and everybody around the table looked like me. They were all white. Well, the neighborhood is not a white neighborhood. And so my cohort and I looked at it and said, this doesn't feel like a community invite to us. This feels like one constituency that's interested in what we're doing. So we told them that. We said, we'd love to do something in your park, but we won't do something if we're not invited. And this doesn't feel like a real invitation. And we left. And about a month and a half later, we get a call from that community and saying, hey, we heard you. Would you come back? And so we did. And they had reached across the cultural divides, the barriers that divide us. They had done that reaching out. And now the room was a kaleidoscope of the colors that reflected the neighborhood. And we felt like we had a real invitation. So then we launched our first experimental branch. The whole thing's an experiment. And so now we took over another blighted park and started to restore it with the neighborhood. And we're having the same results in Washington Park. So then the Latino community on the south side, we're a pretty segregated city, said, hey, we can't get into your program because of your 2-mile radius. And we said, well, the only way we can grow is neighborhood by neighborhood. What do you think? And so then we had a partnership down there. We took over a 100-year-old tavern, a 100-year-old bar that we bought and turned into a third center. So now we have 3 centers scattered across the city, but each one is much bigger than that, because in the Menominee Valley on the south side, we actually built the park, what they were teaching from. It was an old railway bed. It was a brownfield, or brownfield is like a polluted area.
Oh,
So
wow.
we, with the city and the county and the state and a group called the Menominee Valley Partners, which is an economic development group, we all worked together to clean up this area. So not only were we creating a park, we were creating an area like a light industrial zone. Well, now there's like, I forget, like between 4,000 and 6,000 jobs that are happening in this once polluted corridor right next to this really vibrant park. And the Hank Aaron State Trail, which was, we partnered with Hank Aaron, believe it or not, from
I love
baseball.
him. I loved him as a kid. What a great guy.
Yeah, well, we actually, I was so happy to get to know him before he passed away, but he was part of this project. And
Oh,
so
wow.
that was like a 25 million restoration work on top of a much more expensive full restoration. Anyway, long story short, we're now serving like, well, 500,000 visitors come through our parks in a year, and school kid wise and adults, it's like 250,000 people are coming through our formal programs. That's pre-COVID. We're serving the same number during COVID, but it's in a different way. It's mostly people coming through the parks, because we haven't had the centers open in the same way, but they're opening up now, so we're getting excited.
Thank goodness. I mean, that seems like the most ridiculous thing, to close down a center like that, when there's a disease, because being in nature is so healthy for the mind, for the body.
Well, we didn't close down. All we did was shift the way that our programming worked. And because we were able to meet people outside around campfires, and we had a forest camp of kindergarten kids that were outside the entire time in the snow, bundled up. And we just shifted and then we did virtual work with our schools to make sure we were, working. I love my staff. We have the best staff in the world, and it's super creative, and the pandemic brought that creativity out.
Ah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I think a lot of people found deeper creativity, deeper connection during the pandemic, or the quarantine. I love that. And then, so talk to me about, like, what are the things that move you the most? I mean, everything you're saying is making me cry, but I'm like, I should bring Kleenexes next time I talk to you. But, what is it that makes you feel the most proud of what you and the Urban Ecology Center, or your staff, or the kids, or any of the experiences that you've seen? Yeah, what makes you
Yeah,
proud?
there's so much, honestly. I mean, I can start with a kid, Roger Coleman. He was a 3rd grade kid who came into the program, single mom at home, stumbled into the trailer, got involved in what we were doing, and then just grew up with us. He grew up with us. And so ultimately he would do homework with us in high school. He became a high school outdoor intern. He started training other high school kids in how to do the work. He went to college, came back, got a job with us. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. And there's a lot of examples like that, or maybe it's Katrina, who is the mom of Donald and CJ. And she was in her home, in a her story is she was just depressed in living in the middle of the city, not knowing how to make ends meet, and her kids were her lifeblood. And so they would come home and they'd open up the shades and try to get her engaged. But when they got involved at the Ecology Center, they invited her to the Ecology Center, and then she had a complete transformation, and then started working for us as well after volunteers. So yeah, and that's just, and then you have the natural story of the the amphibians and the birds and all that are coming back. And
The frogs have 4 legs again?
yeah, the frogs have 4 legs again.
I'm
Yeah,
so
we're in good shape.
glad.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
So
didn't interrupt, but that was.
no, that's okay. I spill over with my tears a lot too, so you're gonna make me cry. But it's
That's so beautiful. I love all those stories. And then I love the thing, and this is so interesting because as I've been doing these stories we love, I'm meeting lots of people who do things good with the environment. And when we talked originally about doing this show, and you had mentioned that significant life experience in nature, I see that now with everybody that I've interviewed who's doing something good, green energy or helping, you know, baby eagles or something like that. And I really love that you've brought that up because now I'm seeing that in this whole world of people that I'm interviewing, people who are doing good. So you've really kind of opened my mind about how important that is and the mentorship, and when you're talking about Katrina and her kids or Roger, you become a mentor, but then when they're in a family where there's no dad, you probably get a chance to be, not just a mentor, but someone that really cares and that is supporting their well-being in other ways. I would imagine just knowing who you are.
yeah, no, it is a beautiful thing, and it is. I mean, it's such a cool thing that there's so many layers. But we're actually seeking out blighted, degraded green space. Most nature center type people like me would be going after the beautiful place,
Right.
already there with the lake, and we're going to bring people there and do recreation. That's all great. But what we find is actually cleaning up an area with the community that lives there and providing that source of pride is really it's so powerful because now you're connecting in a different way. It's like, oh, I planted that tree, and look that tree is now producing nuts. I mean, it's
you're changing a culture. You're changing a sense of identity.
yeah.
With the
And then,
communities that live there, that they can start to, like when you say community pride, but it's also personal pride in the sense of, like you're saying, I planted that thing, and that that's so healing.
yeah, and then it goes on from there. I mean, because now the place is a safe place to be. So now small businesses start coming around that area. The schools start to improve. I mean, it's like planting a seed and then you let it blossom. But it's and the people who are doing the work and the people who are doing the volunteering are from the neighborhood. I can't say that enough. It's not when people say, well, you have to, how we need to find a community group. Well, we are the community. We are the community group, and that's
Right.
I live 7 blocks as part of the work. But it's
So it sounds like not only are you growing nature, you're growing community, you're growing kids, and you're growing single parents in ways that is really valuable.
yeah. What we're doing is we're creating the container for this goodness to grow. We had a candlelight walk last weekend at one of our centers in the valley, and we had over between 2,000 and 3,000 people showed up just to go for a walk with candlelight and campfires and drink some hot chocolate, roast some s'mores. And if you looked at the faces, I mean, you didn't see a lot because it was a cold day, but the little faces, I mean, it was every color of the sun, in terms of representation. It was bringing people together. It's connecting people in cities to nature and each other. That's the mission. But the thing I just can't stress enough is this can be done anywhere. I mean, it's really going into it from an attitude of abundance, not an attitude of scarcity. And the way in which you get to that abundance is you ask for help. And by asking for help in a legitimate way, like there's no way I could have done this on my own.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many flaws. There's so many things I'm not good at that I needed help.
But you started as one person with a realization, oh, kids need to have consistent experience with nature. So you started out with one person, because that's what I think is so key. You started, and then all this other help starts coming, and you called it, miraculous help. But it shows up, and it's just like what, when you plant one seed, it makes a plant, and the plant has many, 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 many seeds. I don't know how many, but depending on the plant, but lots of seeds. And that's kind of what you've done with what you've done. You've created, you plant the seed in the community, and then the park starts to change, and then the biodiversity starts to increase, and then the cultural diversity starts to increase, and then the culture of pride starts to increase, and then the mentorship increases, and then the kids feel more sense of who they are, and then they go on a walk with 2,000 people in the different cultures, and they go, oh, we're in one community and you're in another community, but we're friends. We believe in the same thing. We have the same value. We like nature. We like each other. And there's this connection that can happen. And I think that's so beautiful. So go on.
The only thing I would quibble with is it wasn't coming out of me. It was, and I actually think about this a lot. I think that, well, I don't want to get too cosmic on you, but I think that
I'm cosmic, babe.
I think there's a sacredness to the work that's going on, and I think that we built this incredible arboretum out of the original high crime 12 acres of land. That original land is now a 40-acre arboretum called the Milwaukee Rotary Centennial Arboretum, because we bought some factories that were in disrepair. We tore them down. I mean, it's an incredible, like, you can't even believe what you started with and where you ended, right?
Yeah.
But that arboretum has like this special energy to it that attracts people in a special way, and it's quite healing. And I talked to, there's a friend of mine, his name is John Milton, and he's in his 80s, and he does this thing called the Way of Nature. He's a real spiritual guy. He's an amazing man. If you don't know about him, you should get him on your show. But he protects sacred places with indigenous folks around the world. That's one of the things he does. And so I called him up and said, there's some like kind of things going on here that are quite remarkable, just serendipitous things, healing that I'm curious about. Can you actually create a sacred place? Was my question to him. And he laughed and said, no, it's a sacred place. I mean, I was trying to get a definition of it. And he said, you got to think about it like acupuncture, that you have like these meridians in your body, and then you stick a needle in your ear and your ankle gets healed. That has to do with the energy in your body. And you've got these meridians. Well, the earth is a living organism, and the earth has its meridians. And where they channel out is where you end up having these sacred places. So I don't know what's going on with you over there, but my guess is that Milwaukee was built on a meridian, and you didn't create the arboretum. You were created by the arboretum. In essence, do you see my point? I mean, that it was a transfer.
But look, if you're aware, every single particle of this gorgeous planet, and of the stars and the sun and the moon and the other aspects of nature, is sacred. There's nothing, to me, there's nothing. Every human, every plant, every animal, it's sacred. And so I want to expand that. Just as in your body, yeah, you might have this acupressure point, or I don't know where they are, but let's say you've got this acupressure point. This part is still sacred. It's so important.
I totally agree with you.
You got to know that that's everywhere, everywhere. And people, when they see it and they get it, it's like, it's better than drugs, You don't need drugs to recognize this sacredness and reverence. So what is your vision now going forward, and what can others do if they want to create this? You say that other people can do it. Like, what do they need to do this?
I mean, if you go back to my original statement, if every kid on the planet had easy access to natural land from an early age, and every school had a neighborhood ecology center, that's the vision. That's the vision right there. And so then I had the good fortune of, I was speaking about this, and there were some folks in the audience who came up to me afterwards and got very interested. And it turned out that they ran a foundation, and they were interested in supporting our early childhood work. We wrote a grant for that. And then they gave us an extra chunk of money. That's rare that happens. They just, where you get more than you ask for. And they said, we want you to use this money to write a book. So that allowed me to take a little break. And then I wrote this book, Urban Ecology, a natural way to transform kids, parks, cities, and the world. And it's you can get it on Amazon. But more important than the book is what the book has become is like a textbook for courses that we teach. So now we just started up one this week, and we have folks from cities across the country and actually across the globe that are coming to these workshops on how you can find abundance within your community to create something, either something exactly like this or something akin to it if you have a different a node that you're working on in terms of your goodness. But it's
I love it.
It's very cool. So my vision and dream and hope, or our vision and dream and hope, is that others pick up on this and say, oh, wait, we can do this here. There's no reason why we can't do it in Cincinnati. There's no reason we can't do it in Timbuktu. It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I hope everybody in your cities is listening, in all the cities all over the world. Let's do it. Let's get this going, because kids, people, everyone, it seems like when they're in nature, they get some benefit. And so bringing these urban ecological places forth seems like such a benefit to everyone. And I think, I would think just even in terms of air has to be better. If native plants are growing in the area, you're going to be breathing, the plants, take in the carbon dioxide from the cars or from the businesses, and then they bring out oxygen. So even just wanting to breathe better, you're going to get a benefit in that way too. So
bring that up because we're partnering with the medical college here in Milwaukee in Wisconsin, and we're doing a research project specifically on that, where we're sending researchers out, which are students that we're working with this a piece of equipment that can actually measure the air quality in a micro level, and they can compare that to what the air quality is on the street compared to what it's in the park, and then compared to different places in the park. So now we can then, if with this data, once we have the data set, we're assuming, this is our hypothesis, is that there are areas that are better to breathe than other areas within a few blocks of where you live. And so if you're going to do a yoga class, do the yoga class over here, because that's...
If you're in a medical school where there's patients that are coming, take the patients on a walk and teach them to meditate in the park.
Right. Yeah.
Or something, something else, yoga, whatever, that brings them into a calm place. Yeah, I love this.
Well, that nature prescription is becoming a thing where you actually, instead of prescribed a drug, you're prescribed a walk.
Yeah, let's do that. So much better, so much healthier. No side effects, no negative side effects, unless there's like a, whatever. No negative side effects, really.
Yeah, negative side effects. There really are.
Yeah. Well, Ken Leinbach and the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee and centers, I am so very appreciative of you. We will put a link in this for your book on Amazon, and anybody who needs to. Is there another way that they can reach you? Is there anything that you want us to know about how people can reach you specifically? Or
well, these days it's so easy. You can just Google Urban Ecology, and Urban Ecology Center will pop up. My name's Ken Leinbach. You'll find me. And then reach out. Actually, even more importantly, if you're listening to this, odds are I'm not getting necessarily the person who's going to make this happen in your community, but someone who would be connected into this circuit. So if you'd be willing to help figure out just take a moment, think about who you know and who you could spread this information to, who then would get into the people that would actually make it happen. Maybe it's you, but odds are someone.
I love that. Yeah, thank you so much, Ken. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is Stories We Love. Again, you can get the full playlist and bonuses and the links for Ken and everybody else who's a guest at storiesweloveshow.com. Storiesweloveshow.com. Again, my name is Karen Lorre. I'm so very thankful you're here. Let's create more urban ecology. Thank you.